Welcome back all my aspiring pattern makers and my future fashion designers. In this tutorial today, I am going to show you how to create the pattern for this pants. And if you notice, this pants is not a plain simple pants. It is different because it has an inverted pleat at the side front of the pants. So in order for you to create this pants, you can simply use an existing pants pattern that you have, and then you can simply create it in two ways. So today I'm going to show you the two methods of creating this pants pattern that has the inverted pleat at the side front of the pants. So let's get right into me showing you how to do the first method that you can create this pattern. So the first method that we're going to use is the method of simply tracing part of it. Then you're going to create the pleat, and then you're going to trace the other part of the pants. So you will need a long straight line, and I'm using a 60-inch ruler, but you should know that the average pants length is about, say, 38 to 42 inches, depending on how tall the person is. I'm pretty tall, so my pants length is 41 inches. So what you're going to do after you have that long line, because you're going to make sure that you're going to place the pattern over this line. Make sure that your line is long enough where it extends to the other end of the pants. So you must have it like this, right? And the other end, notice here, make sure that it is literally right there, okay? And then what you need to do, you need to place your fabric weight on here. Line it up. This is your fabric weight or your weight. And make sure this is lining up. Yes, it is. So you have your weight on there. You are going to trace from the beginning of the dart all around the center front of the pants. Make sure you put in your notches, all right? And you will trace this all along. And you're going to trace up to that line. So that is your mark, because the whole idea now is to get rid of the dart, because you're going to have your side front seam coming down, and you're going to determine how long you want it to be. But for now, you need to just trace around here. Make sure you put your pointer or your dot, and all you'll need to do now is remove this pants pattern. So once you have that removed, the next thing that you're going to do, you are going to reform that dart leg that you had, right? Just to one side, because this is your side front piece. This is going towards the center front. You can reform your seam line here. 1/2 inch seam allowance I had used, and this would be your center front. So you can do that, okay? And this is going to be your side front. This part is going to be the side front towards the seam. This is the side front towards the center front of the pants. You have to determine how high up you want the pleat to start. If this is your knee, you can go between somewhere between your end of your dart and your knee. You can do half of that measurement. You can measure it and do half of that. Or if you want to go lower down, it's up to your choice how you want to place it. So if this is almost 18 inches, let's say this is 17 inches, you can go halfway, where halfway of 17 inches would be 8.5 inches. So this is your 8.5 inches right here. What you can do, you can draw a perpendicular line that is going to go across. And the next thing that you need to do is that you are going to determine the depth of your pleats. So if you want a 1.5 inch depth, that is fine. You can do 2 inches in your depth. It's up to you. 1.5 to 2 inches, that should be good. So for this, I'm going to choose to use 1.5 inch depth, and I'm going to do this, and whatever I do at the top, I'm also going to do it at the bottom down here. So that's the first 1.5 inch depth that you have, and you can write it for your pleat, all right? And then you're going to need a second one. So the next one is going to be also another 1.5 inch. So you need 1.5 inch here. Because my ruler is not long enough, I'm going to grab this longer ruler that is a 60-inch long one, because I need to create my center. And you can do the same thing for the other one. So this is one side of the inverted pleat. That's the center right here. Okay, and then you need to create another 1.5 inch line. Right, and whatever you do at the top, you must do it towards the hem. You can create another one again, because you're going to need 2 in order to create that inverted pleat. And if you need help on understanding the types of pleats, you can go back and watch my video on the various types of pleats. So now that you have this, the next thing that you're going to do, you're going to extend your line right here, because it needs to be wider. You can do the same for the hem. Since this is the center, this is the other part, because this is going to be the fold. This is going to be the fold line right here of the pleat. This is also going to be the fold of the pleat. And this is also going to be actual the crease area of the fold of the pleat. And this is what you're going to see. So this is going to be folded towards here, the center. And this part is going to have the crease. The same thing here. This is going to be folded towards here. So all I need to do, I need to extend this line, because I will need to use it as a guide to place the pattern that I have on top of that. So this is a pattern, right? And remember, we did trace around to the other part. What I'll suggest for you to do now, look for the line at the bottom, line it up, then line up with the line at the top. So once you line up the bottom, then you're going to place your pattern. This is off a little bit, so make sure you shift it over. Okay, right, that is good. Place another one to secure it. Just double check the bottom at times to make sure that it is on the straight line there, and also the top. You're going to trace from the other end of the dart to the side seam and all around the side seam of that pants pattern that you have. Make sure you include all your notches, because that is very important. Okay, and that's what you have. I would suggest that you put in your knee level mark, because it is very good when you have that on your pattern piece, because that is your actual guide. So make sure that you're putting that in. All right, you have that. If you didn't have it in before, go back and put it in. The same thing for the crotch level. You should have that at least for the center front. Okay, and you can go back and put that in on your pattern. So once you have the mark there, then you're good to go. You need to put the tip of the dart right there, or the dart end, and then you can remove your pattern piece. Okay, so this is the tip of your dart end right here. You're going to form it out, and you're going to simply draw your line there. Because you were not able to see the entire part for the crotch line, you can just extend it and you will have your crotch line on your pattern. So before we even go any further, this was a pattern that you are using and not a sloper. So because you have the dart here, all you have to do is add your seam allowance to this, which is 1/2 inch seam allowance, right? and you need to add that to where you want it to stop. Because this is a crotch level, you're not going to stop there. You're going to come down to where you want it to be, and you're going to add your seam allowance. So now you have this. You can choose now to also have your seam here, because this would be your part that is going to cut out for your inverted pleat, and you're going to add your 1/2 inch seam allowance also on the other side. And this is what it will look like. Shape this out, okay? So what I suggest that you do now is that you are going to cut this out, okay? Since you have this cut out, you're going to form out your pleat. So this is your fold part, and you also have a fold right here because it is an inverted pleat. And remember, you can go back and watch my video on the difference between an inverted pleat and the other types of pleat that I spoke about in that video. So you'll have this folded over to here, which is the center, like this. Okay. And then I usually put the weight there to hold it down, because if I'm dealing with pleats, then it needs to have that weight there to secure it. And then you do the same thing for the other side. Okay. And you will fold that over also. Okay. And if you notice here, this is your actual pattern now. All right. This is like the original pattern that you have. And look, I'm going to place this over it to show you. Here you are. Here you are. Okay. This was folded here. Place it over, because it needs to be flat. Right? Make sure it is flat underneath. And there you are. Okay? That's your pattern right there. So this is the front of the pants. Since this is where you're going to start with your pleat, all you have to do, you have to make sure that you sew here when you're making it. After you folded it and you're making the outfit, you are going to sew right here along this line, right? And you're going to do the same thing on the other side. You're going to sew there. So you are literally going to stitch this down, right? Following the line. So you need to cut this out. So literally, I'm going to use another paper to show you what it looks like when you have cut it out. And this is what it looks like, okay? So you cut this out, and when you're sewing it now, you're going to place these two pieces together like this. Okay? Put your notches together like this, and you're going to sew from here all along here down to right here. And what you're going to do after you sew there, you're going to open it, right, and form the pleat. Because once you form the pleat like this and hold it like that, then you can go from the back and you can just now stitch there to secure it a little bit and stitch the other end, so you will have your inverted pleat. Now looking at this inverted pleat from the back, you will notice that it is literally a box pleat, and I spoke about that on my video, that it would now be a box pleat. So this is the first method of creating this inverted pleated side front for your pants. You can put your little notches at the end, so when you are actually forming the pleat, when you're pressing it on the iron board, you will still have that line and you will have it accurately. All right, so this is the front and the first method. The next method that you're going to use to create this pattern for this side front inverted pleat, you are going to use the slash and spread method. So with the slash and spread method, you are going to retrace the entire pants front. But what I want you to do, I want you to first create that line that you're going to use as a guide for your grain line. It is also actually a grain line. So you're going to create that line and you're going to use the long ruler that I have, the 60-inch ruler. It is very important that you have one of these when you're doing your pattern making. So what you can do now, you can simply trace out the entire pattern for your pants. So place your pattern down. Make sure that your long line, your green line, is actually going down. There you are. And what you're going to do, you're going to trace around the entire pants pattern that you have. So this is this slash and spread method, and you're going to go all around, all right, and trace the entire pants pattern that you have. So we call this the slash and spread method, and I'm going to show you why, because we have to first trace the entire pants, and then we're going to do some slashing, and then we are going to do some spreading. And don't forget your dart point, all right? And you have pretty much everything. What I would suggest for you to do also, you can form out the line for your crotch. So this is your crotch level line. When you are making pants, you should have a crotch level line, and you should also have your knee level line. All right, those are two important lines that you need, and your green line also on your pants. So once you have this, even though you took up the pattern now, you need to retrace those lines because you need them on your pattern that you're going to work with, right? The knee level, the crotch level, you need both of them, and they should be perpendicular to the grain line, okay? Just a sidebar. You can form out your dart here because you're going to need that, so form up both dart legs, okay? And now that you have this is the center front, you can create that line there because this was a pattern and not a sloper. If you're working with a sloper, then obviously then you can add your seam allowances afterwards. So you can do this to show that it is a pattern that you're working with and not a sloper. So the next thing that you need to do after you have traced it out, you're going to now slash this open. So you are going to slash around here. And I would just slash to the top of that. It doesn't really matter, okay? So the next thing that you need to do after you have slashed that, I would suggest that you now place this on a piece of paper that you have. So you need to get a separate piece of paper for your pattern when you're doing this. So you can cut this off. Okay. Once you have that cut off, then the next step is that you will need a piece of pattern paper, and you can do this in one of two ways. So you have your pattern piece here because this is the center front. This is a piece that goes over here, and then this is the piece that you have here. So this is the piece that you have for your side seam, which is right here, your side seam, and this would be your side front. Make sure you label these properly, okay, or 1 and 2. What you need to do next, you can find a straight line somewhere along here that you need, right? And you can plan accordingly. So if you have, say this, and you need that 1.5 inch or the 2 inches, is up to you which one you want to use. If you using an 1.5 inch, then you need to have at least 6 inches in between here. So that is what you're looking for, at least 6 inches in between, okay? So what you can do, you can use your long ruler and you're going to draw your line that is going to be here. Make sure that this is going to be long enough, okay? So you have that. And the next thing that you're going to do, you're going to place your pattern along the edge of that line. Okay, so you can place it there. And when you place it there, the next thing that you need to do, you're going to tape it down, because this is the slash and spread method. And please make sure that you are accurately placing it properly, because otherwise something is going to give or something is going to bubble up and it's not going to be precise. So make sure it is exactly on the line, not 1/16 over or 1/32 of an inch over. Okay? So the next thing you need to do now, you need to extend that knee line that you have. Okay, and you need to extend also the crotch line that you have. You are extending these 2 lines here. So again, you're going to determine how high you want this. If this is your crotch, this is your knee, I would say halfway between should be good. Or if you want to go lower towards the knee, that is up to you. And you can go halfway here. I would say this should be your line right here. So you can have this as your marker. So now you need 1.5 inch for your pleat. Okay, all the way down. 1.5 inch for your pleat. And you will need another 1.5 inch for the other fold of your pleat. And if you're doing 2 inches, it is fine, but try not to go more than 2 inches. So this is the first 1.5 inch. It's going to be folded underneath, and then this part is going to fold on top of it. And so this would be your center. So this would be one side of the pleat, and you need the other side, so you need another 1.5 inch. And you also need another 1.5 inch again. Okay. Now that you have that, you can align the other pattern piece that you have with this. Okay. Make sure you line it up properly. All right. And once you have that, you can tape it down like that. Tape it down. And you can tape this also. Now, one thing I must say to you, this is your pleated area. So this is your one side of your pleat. This is the other side. When you put it together, it's going to be your inverted pleat. And you need your seam allowance up here. You need to come up 1/2 inch from that level that you think you want to stop at. And then you need to put your seam allowance in for the side front. So if you don't put that in, that's going to be a problem. You need the seam allowance for your dart leg, or what used to be your dart leg, but it's now not your dart. It's simply going to be a side front seam. So you need to have that, okay? And that is very important. Okay. So this is what it would look like. This is, you can put a notch where the dart tip is supposed to be as a guide for you to sew. All right, you can put a notch there. So put a notch there. You can also put a notch there at the crotch level, and make sure that you put a notch here for where you are going to fold and also the center. So extend your line here if it doesn't meet at the top. Put a notch there, put a notch here. All right, extend your hemline because now you have that pleat there. Put a notch here, notch, notch, and you have one right here and also here, okay? And this is what your pants pattern is going to look like, and this is the slash and spread method. You still cut around here, 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 continue, cut this out, all right? And that is what your pattern will look like, just the same as what I showed you before. Now that you know how to create the front pattern for this side front inverted pleat, what you need now is the back pattern for the pants. If you are using a sloper, then you need to trace your sloper and create that pattern for it. But if you have an existing pattern, you can use that, or you can just retrace the existing pattern and use that. I'm going to trace the existing pattern because I like to have a different pattern for each of my pattern pieces when I'm making a garment. Even if I use a different pattern, I want to retrace that same pattern. So you're going to do the same thing where you're going to create that seam line, right? And you need a long ruler for this one, as I stated before. So draw a long line that you can use to place your pattern or your sloper, whichever one that you're using. And what you're going to do next, you're going to place your back pattern over the grain line for your pants. Have it like this, okay? And line it up properly, because if it is off, everything is going to be off. Okay, this is all about pattern making. Everything has to be precise. Yep, you have to check both ends. Okay, this needs like a little smidget over. Yep, that is good. So now that you have this, you can go ahead and trace around this. And this is the back of the pants. And without the pattern being labeled, you can tell what is the back of the pants from what is the front. The crotch at the back is totally different and deeper and longer than the crotch for the front. Okay? And that's coming from the center back to the crotch. So you just trace around this. Now, because I'm using a pattern, I don't have to add any seam allowance here. All you're going to do, make sure that you have your dart point here that is going through, right? And make sure that you have your notches here. You have your 2 notches for the center back, and that's it. So this is the back of the pants, and you can write here, pants back, or back of the pants. Okay, you have your dart there. You shape out your dart. You don't have to add any seam allowance to this because you already have seam allowance on the pattern piece. You were not using a sloper, but if you were using a sloper, then you need to add your seam allowance for that. Now, the next thing that you will need, because even though this is a back, you will need a waistband. Take your waist measurement or whatever it is, and you're going to determine whether or not you're going to need 1.5 inches or 1.25 inches on the waistband. When it's finished, this is what the waistband pattern piece looks like. You can either do it long way like this and then you just cut one, or you can create it and do a fold line here, and make sure it is taking your waist measurement. Then you are adding 2 inches to your waist measurement. I usually do that for whatever I'm making because your overlap should be about, say, 1 inch to 1.5 inches. This one has a finished width of 1.25 inches. And once you have a finished width of 1.25 inches, you need to have this at least 2.5 inches wide because it's 1.25 inches, plus your 1/2 inch seam allowances on either side. So in total, this should be 3.5 inches wide that you're using, times the length of your waist plus 2 inches, which is actually 1/2 inch on either end for the seam allowance and that 1 inch for your overlap. Now with this pattern, I didn't have a closure at the center front. I choose to have a closure at the side seam because I like to use invisible zippers for the closures, and because of that, I prefer to place my zipper along the side seam, and usually for women's clothing it is always on the left side. So if you are using an invisible zipper and place it at center front, to me it is not looking good for a pair of pants. So that's why I opt to put it at the side seam on the left side of the body. So you can use an invisible zipper there, and then you'll have your waistband to finish it off. If you need help on how to actually install an invisible zipper, you can also go back and watch this video on how to install an invisible zipper. For me, I just simply like the clean finish look and the elegance that an invisible zipper gives to a garment as opposed to the regular standard zipper. So these are your pattern pieces: the back pants, the waistband, and this would be what your finished one look like for the front with the pleat depth. This is also the draft, because you can keep this as your draft or you can create the actual pattern from this. If you are not keeping this as a draft, then you would cut along the green line here and it would give you this pattern piece. So now you have the front pants pattern, the back pants pattern, and the waistband. If you opt to have pockets on this, you can have pocket on the side seam, which would be your right side, because if you are using an invisible zipper, as I stated before, and you have the invisible zipper on the left side, then you only need to have one pocket, which is going to be on the right side. You will use the center line here as your green line, or you can use any one of these two lines as your green line. So this would be your pants front. So in conclusion, now that you know how to create the pattern for this pants that has a side front inverted pleat using 2 methods, I hope you will go ahead and give it a shot. You can either use the slash and spread method, use the tracing method on one side, and then create your pleats and trace the other side. I hope that this video was helpful to you and you will give it a shot and try to make a pants like this using a pattern that you already have that has a dart at the front. And if that pants that you have don't have a dart at the front, that is fine. You can create that seam line that goes straight up, and that would compensate for the dart closing that I had on the previous pants. With that being said, if you have not yet subscribed to my channel, what are you waiting for? Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And if you like what you see, hit that like button. And please don't keep this video to yourself. No, we are not selfish people. We are going to share. So go ahead and share this video with others around the world so they too can create one of their own and wear it well. It's all about leveling up, level up, level up, level up, level up, level up. We have to level up our game when it comes to fashion. So thank you for watching and see you soon on the next video to come. Bye now.